This was extremely interesting because it seemed to confirm the direct link between toxic pollution and people's health, as it's likely these villagers haven't been exposed to many obesogenic compounds. I mean, everything I'd heard about Tibet makes me think of pristine snow-capped mountains and fresh clean water and air. But when I got to the end of the article, I discovered something that threw me. Apparently, located right next to this village was a large Chinese mining operation. And I know how much pollution they produce, so that theory was out the window. I decided the best thing was to go and investigate for myself. So I made the long trek to the Tibetan village. When I arrived, I settled into a small guest house and went about befriending the locals and trying to uncover what was happening. Their air and water was indeed heavily polluted from the close mine. But the people seemed very healthy, and I noticed that very few were overweight. Many of them also looked years younger than their true ages. The more I looked around, the more apparent it was that something really strange was up. But I couldn't figure out what. Then one morning, the landlady of the guest house offered me a cup of tea. I accepted, and after she poured, I took a big swig and instantly spat it out all over her beautiful white tablecloth. "I am so sorry, but what is this? It tastes awful," I exclaimed. It was clearly not like any kind of tea that I had ever tasted. The landlady was extremely embarrassed and apologized profusely. She explained that this was their local special tea. And legend was that if you drank a cup of it every day, you would be protected and live a long and healthy life, and that it would ward off all sickness and pain. The people of the village had drank it for generations, so were used to the strong, bitter taste. "Where did you get it from?" I asked. She told me that it's a traditional blend that has been brewed in the local monastery for thousands of years. The monks sold it to the villagers and then would use any money they made to feed and house the poor. I asked if she could give me directions, and I set off. I made my way up a narrow stone staircase set into a steep hill to the monastery in the distance. When I eventually arrived at its large wooden doors, I rang an old rusty bell hanging from a piece of rope. After several minutes, they creaked open and a friendly-looking monk greeted me. I told him that I was very interested in learning about the tea. "It's our secret elixir," he whispered. "The recipe has been passed down through generations, and it has magical healing properties." I was, of course, very skeptical, but asked if I could perhaps buy some. He nodded, asked me to wait, and disappeared inside. A couple of minutes later, he returned clutching a small wooden box. He handed it to me, and I peered inside, discovering a strange-smelling mixture of what looked like ground herbs and spices. "What's it made of?" I inquired. "Unfortunately, that's something I can't reveal," the monk replied. "It has been our traditional recipe for over 2,000 years, and it is a grave violation of the monastic code for me to share the ingredients with anyone." "No problem," I said. "I completely understand. How should I prepare it?" "Just stir a heaped spoonful of the mixture into the cup of warm water and let it sit for 7 seconds. No more, no less," he told me. I paid him, gave my thanks, and set off back to the guest house. The next morning, I packed and headed home, clutching the small wooden box close to me. The minute I arrived, I went straight to the lab and began trying to reverse engineer the contents. And I was very surprised at what I discovered. The first ingredient was Asian green tea leaf. Green tea is actually great at reducing oxidative stress and has been shown in several laboratory studies to help reduce damage caused by chemicals such as BPA. It has also been shown to stimulate glucuronidation, a detoxification pathway used for eliminating toxins from the body. The next ingredient was something called Asian ginseng, also known as Panax ginseng. According to scientific research, it enhances mood, supports immunity, and delays the appearance of aging. But more importantly, research shows that it also detoxifies the body quickly from foreign pollutants. Next up, I identified olive leaves, an agonist to the TGR5 receptor. This means it can boost your metabolism by supporting thyroid function and your body's hormone levels. And in addition, I found several other important active compounds, including quercetin, a well-known super antioxidant that can help protect cells from damage by the free radicals that are slowing down your metabolism and causing premature signs of aging. Turmeric, shown to reverse many of the harmful effects of chemical exposure and dramatically decreasing oxidative stress throughout the body. And various types of Asian mushrooms including shiitake, reishi, and maitake, all of which are chock full of hypolipemic fat-reducing properties. It also contained grapeseed, which detoxifies your body of cadmium, a harmful obesogen that can be found in foods like cereals, nuts, and vegetables. "I couldn't believe what I was seeing," exclaimed Chen. Here were all natural ingredients that, when combined, managed to seemingly counteract the harmful effects of toxic obesogens. And these monks that made it for generations probably didn't even know what an obesogen was. It seemed to support healthy hormone levels, reduce fat storage, and stop the uncontrollable cravings, whilst at the same time helping to support a healthy heart, brain, and joints. That would explain why the villagers who, even though they lived in a toxic environment, managed to live longer, seem younger, and were of a healthier weight. I was still skeptical but excited at the same time. But above all, I wanted to help my friends and family, explained Chen. I knew all the ingredients in the tea were natural and had been taken successfully for generations by the villagers, who managed to live a long and healthy life, so I was positive it wasn't dangerous. I asked my good friend and neighbor who had been seriously overweight for years if he'd be willing to put it to the test. He was more than happy to give anything that might work a try. So I mixed him a cup of the foul-tasting tea every evening. The results? Well, they were more than spectacular. In just 3 days, he had higher energy, better mood, and felt an increased zest for life. And by the end of the first week, he'd lost over 5 pounds. He hadn't made a single change to his lifestyle. He didn't do any exercise, didn't change his diet, still eating all the unhealthy foods he loved so much. How is this possible? Maybe it was the placebo effect, I rationalized, and he was going to regain the lost weight quickly. Yet, by the end of the second week, he dropped another 5 pounds. And after just 1 month, he'd lost over 20. The results were totally incredible. Unfortunately, the supply from the monk had almost run out, and I needed more to give to my friends and family. Me too. So I set about making a new batch. I even improved on it by adding in several other natural ingredients that I was sure would make it even more potent. One was cat's claw, an Amazonian vine that reduces fatigue while slowing down the effects of aging. And another was a superfruit from Brazil called graviola. The Brazilians use it to help them lose weight. It also increases energy levels and helps boost their immune system. The formula now contains a total of 20 natural extracts and super nutrients, making it even more powerful and effective than the monks. We have been taking it for over 3 years now, with amazing results across the board. And more importantly, 0 negative side effects. I would love to get this out there to help more people, but the risk to my family from our government is just too high. Even if I left China, we would be looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives. Adrian, I know we've just met, but I feel your intense pain. You seem a very good, open-hearted person. You've spent most of your life helping others, so I'm going to share the full recipe with you. But you must promise that after you have used it for your wife, you try to help as many others as possible. He then grabbed a napkin from the table, borrowed a pen from the waiter, and started writing furiously. When he was done, he thrust the formula in my hand. "There you go," he said. "Just follow these instructions exactly, and give it to your wife every evening before bed. I promise that in no time you're going to be amazed with the results." With that, we both stood up, I gave Chen a big thankful bear hug, and he wished me good night and started to leave. He stopped before reaching the door, turned around and chuckled, "Don't forget to warn Amy about the taste." Then he left. Over the next couple of weeks, I searched high and low for all of the ingredients on the list. They ended up costing hundreds of dollars, and it took days to prepare the tea to Chen's exact specifications. I had to extract the seeds and leaves, let them dry, grind them down, and measure them into exactly the right ratios. It was very time-intensive to create even just this small amount. But I reasoned that if it indeed worked for Amy as Chen promised, it would all be worth it. In the future, I could try buying the ingredients in larger quantities and have a professional natural formulator do the preparation for me, cutting down the costs and time it would take to prepare. Then we'd have a supply that could last us months. But first, I just wanted to see the results. It took a little while to convince Amy to try it, though. Because of all her past failures, she didn't believe anything could work. But in the end, she reluctantly agreed. So that night, I prepared the mixture for her. She took a sip and immediately started gagging. I literally had to beg her to drink the rest. She said it was the most disgusting thing she'd ever tasted, that it better work. The next morning, she told me that she'd slept better than she had in years, and had literally bounced out of bed with buckets of energy. By that same evening, something incredible had happened. Before she took her next tea, she stood on the bathroom scale and she'd lost 2 whole pounds. Still, Amy was worried that this would all be temporary and she would regain that lost weight quickly. But by the end of the second week, she had dropped another 10. And it didn't stop there, because after just 4 weeks, she had lost an incredible 67 pounds. She even went to her sister's house to step on her scale as she thought ours must be malfunctioning. She also couldn't believe her eyes when she looked in the mirror. Her stubborn love handles and belly bulge were disappearing. She started fitting into her favorite dresses that she hadn't worn in years. And her face looked younger and more radiant than it had in at least a decade. Her skin had improved, and her wrinkles and worry lines appeared to have flattened out completely. Her arms were tight again. Her hips were slender. Her stomach flat. She looked hot. Every single trace of her pregnancy fat was gone. People kept asking for her secret. Men were turning their heads to check her out. Plus, she had so much more energy, even her hair seemed shinier, fuller, and thicker, just like in high school. The doctors were shocked. They couldn't believe a transformation like this was possible without strenuous exercise and a punishing diet. But the day that the change really sunk in for me, I came home from work and saw Amy in just a pair of leggings and a sports bra. She hadn't worn clothes this tight in decades. Her tiny, flat stomach was on display while she was confidently walking through the house. She looked absolutely incredible, and something stirred inside me that I hadn't felt in years. However, I was worried she might feel self-conscious, that if I tried to give her a hug, she'd shrug me off as had happened countless times before. But I couldn't help myself, so I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close to me. It was then that I felt an ease within her